In this video, I'm going to talk about some common misconceptions about tax returns in Germany. I'll talk about who has to submit a tax return in Germany, when do you have to submit a Steuererklärung, how to file taxes in Germany, what are the different documents required for a tax declaration, when is it advantageous to submit a tax return in Germany. At the end, I'll also give some examples. To find out who has to submit a tax declaration, we firstly need to look at your tax class. As you might be aware that there are 6 tax classes in Germany, and in many cases you are not obliged to submit a tax return. However, if you are in tax class number 1, or in case if you are married, both of the partners are in tax class 4, then you are not obliged to submit a tax return. That said, if you are in tax class 1 but you are having 2 jobs and the second job is in tax class number 6, then you are obliged to submit a tax return. So point number 2, when exactly do you have to submit your tax declaration? For all mandatory tax filers, the deadline is generally the 31st of July of the following year. However, there are cases where you can get an extension, and because of this pandemic situation, the deadlines have been extended for the year of 2020 and 2021 way beyond the July 31st deadline. Here, I need to put an emphasis that if you are obliged to submit a tax return and somehow you do not submit it, then there will be a fine. The late fee is generally 0.25% of the assessed tax, but at least 25 euros each month that you are late to submitting your tax return. A maximum of 25,000 euros fine can be given if you do not submit your tax return, so be careful. Point number 3 is how to file taxes in Germany. Well, there are multiple ways through which you can submit a tax return in Germany. Firstly, you can do it using an online platform. Secondly, you can contact a Steuerhilfeverein. And thirdly, you can contact a Steuerberater. Obviously, if you contact a lawyer, then the fees will be definitely higher, and it depends on case to case and lawyer to lawyer. But I'll talk about the first option, and that is through online platforms. If you want to look into a free option, then the government of Germany has made an online platform which is called Elster, through which you can submit your taxes free of cost. That said, as this is a platform from the government, it is very extensive, and for many beginners it is very difficult to get started with. On top of that, it is difficult because firstly it is in German language, and secondly it is covering every single tax situation that you can think of. That is why people generally get scared and they do not submit their tax returns, because they see the Elster platform and think it's going to be a big hassle. However, there are certain online platforms that can help you out in that situation. For example, I have a complete tutorial on how to submit your tax return using the online platform WunderTax. If you are interested, you can watch it here. With these softwares, you simply need to fill in certain information, and that leads to point number 4, which is what are the documents that are required to submit a tax return. If you're liking the content so far, I would really appreciate if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. For all employees in Germany, they generally receive a document in addition to their January salary if they have been working in the previous year, and that document is called Lohnsteuerbescheinigung. In that document, you have all of the detail from your employer, how much taxes you have paid, how much income tax you have contributed into, how much social contribution have you paid, and many other details that you need in order to correctly fill your tax return. Additionally, you need a bank account and a registered address in Germany. Many people have asked me, what if they have lost this Lohnsteuerbescheinigung? How can they get it back? You can directly contact your previous employer and ask for this Lohnsteuerbescheinigung, and they should have it in record because they need to keep all of these documents for up to 10 years for all of their employees. And due to any reason that you do not want to contact your employer, you can also contact directly the relevant finance amt and ask for your document, because your employer should submit all of your documents to the finance amt. So do not worry if you've lost it, simply contact your employer or your finance amt. Point number 5 is what are the advantages of submitting a tax return. On an average, every person that submits a tax return in Germany, they get up to 1,000 euros back from their tax return. As people are getting an average of 1,000 euros, chances are that you might get even higher, as this tax return is based on your expenses. So if you show a lot of eligible expenses, you can easily get an amount that is way higher than this 1,000 euros. If you are an employee, the eligible expenses would be anything that is related to your work. So traveling to and from your work, anything you bought that help you out in your work. For example, a mobile phone that you use for your work, a laptop, any other equipment, a printer, papers, stuff like that. And if you are a student, you can put in so many different kinds of expenses. For example, all of your education fee, which would include your registration fee, your tuition fee, anything that help you out in your education. For example, a mobile phone, laptop, printers, papers, printing out your thesis, so many different things. I have a detailed video for students which you can watch here. So if you're not obliged to submit a tax return, the deadlines do not apply to you. That means you can submit up to 4 years in the past. So for the year 2022, you can submit in the year 2023, 24, 25 and in 2026 as well. After that, the submission will not be eligible. That said, if in the following years you become eligible to submit a tax return, it is highly recommended that you submit your tax return as soon as possible, because once submitted you cannot resubmit your tax return, and in many cases the finance arm does not accept expenses from a previous year if you have submitted a tax return for a year in the future. For example, if you submit a tax return for 2021 and do not submit your tax return for 2020, and in the year 2020 you had some expenses which you needed to carry forward to 2021, in many cases the finance arm will not carry forward those losses. So you need to be careful like that. Let's take an example. Someone came from a foreign country to Germany 3 years ago. They spent 1.5 years as a student, and after 1.5 years they got a job and they have been working as a full-time employee since the past 1.5 years. So first year they were just a student, maybe they did some part-time jobs, maybe they did not. The second year they were a student for 6 months in which they did their thesis. The second 6 months they were a full-time employee, and in the third year they were a full-time employee. So in this situation, this person was never required to submit a tax return, as they did not have 2 jobs at the moment and they were always in tax class number 1. So the best scenario for them would be to submit the tax return for the first year, as they might have a lot of expenses because of their student status. They can put in all of their education costs, laptops, printers, as I said, everything that is related to their studies. Then they would have to wait a minimum of 6 weeks, because the finance arm takes a minimum of 6 weeks to respond to a tax declaration. And if they had any losses, the finance arm would give them a certificate stating their losses. So after getting this document from the finance arm, now they can submit the taxes for the second year, and they can put in the losses for their previous year as well. So after the submission of second year, they again have to wait up to 6 weeks, and then if there were losses or if they had paid a lot of taxes, then they can get a tax return or a tax loss settlement. With this tax loss settlement, now it is advisable that they submit their third year tax return. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have to submit a lot of years, it is best that you submit the tax return right now. As a student, you might be thinking that this does not make sense, but as soon as you finish your first year, learn about everything that you can put in your tax return and submit your tax return. If you want to find out which expenses you can put in your tax return as a student, you can watch this video here. And if you are an employee and want to submit your tax return, you can watch this video here. Thanks for watching. Bleib gesund, and I'll see you in this video.